We are Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, is Evan Jansen. This show is always live, broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park. Now, we're also streaming live between 9 and 12 every weekday morning on our YouTube channel. You can watch us back on that same channel on demand a little bit later in the day. Today we ask you the question, another doping scandal. It's going from sport to sport. At the moment, we ask you this question. Can sport still be drug-free? What are your views? Should there be drug-free sport and doping sport? Have we reached this point? Have you lost faith in the cleanliness of sport at all? That's the question. Send us your views. We'd love to hear from you. We'll put it up a little bit later and we'll have an interactive forum. That's the question of the day, the news of the day. Elvis Presley is standing by.
Thank you, Evan, and let's get right to it. Your headlines. President Jacob Zuma has arrived in Berlin, where he is meeting the German Chancellor Angela Merkel for bilateral talks later today. The United States Security Council will consider imposing targeted sanctions on stakeholders in Burundi. And Russian authorities have acknowledged that a terrorist attack could have caused last month's Russian plane crash in Egypt. Those are all your headlines, but first let's find out from Kendall Bakamate what's happening on the sports field. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you very much, and good morning to you at home as well. In sport, this is what we've got for you for today. The World Anti-Doping Agency releases its report and calls for Russia to be banned from all athletics events over widespread doping offences. Also, German FA President Wolfgang Nietzbach resigns amid allegations that Germany bought the rights to host the 2006 World Cup. And Hanneke Meyer's future Springbok coach suffers another blow as the Western Cape ANC calls on Saru not to renew his contract. That's what you'll have in your sport, around about 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's start off with our top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma has been welcomed with a full military parade in Berlin, where he's meeting the German Chancellor Angela Merkel later today. South Africa is Germany's biggest trading partner on the African continent. But this is the first time these two world leaders are engaging in direct bilateral talks.
President Zuma arrived into a wet Berlin, but his spirits will be far from dampened as he makes his state visit here. Germany is rolling out the red carpet for him when the meetings get underway fully today with full military honours. He's meeting with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel to discuss the deepening trade ties between the two countries.
What we're doing is bringing our business people together. We've put together a significant business delegation which is engaged right now in a business forum. And I think what will happen there is we'll find that the conversations that are already taking place between South African and German business people will be deepened and strengthened. And that's what we look to as an outcome here.
There are over 600 German companies operating in South Africa, providing at least 100,000 jobs. It's a beneficial setup for both countries. But this visit won't only focus on trade relations.
Over the last months and years, Germany has more and more been openly criticizing the way the South African government and the ANC has been handling corruption issues. So trade is going to be very important, of course, but there are going to be more tricky issues on the agenda as well.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the South African President Jacob Zuma are holding their meetings here at the Bundeskanzleramt in Berlin behind me. They'll be hoping that these meetings won't only improve trade ties, but will secure the political relationship between the two countries into the future. Jack Parrick, SABC News, Berlin.
Motor manufacturer BMW South Africa's 42nd anniversary celebration also coincides with President Jacob Zuma's visit to Germany to consolidate the ongoing trade relations between the two countries. It is one of over 600 German companies who invested in South Africa, providing over 100,000 employment opportunities, mainly in the automotive industry, mechanical and engineering sectors.
BMW's biggest plant at the Roslyn Industrial Park north of Pretoria is a global competitor and is the recent winner of the Platinum Plant Award, making it the best in the world. BMW last year alone contributed about 2% of South Africa's GDP.
With 42 years of experience, it really shows you that we've really had a long-term investment, and we are certainly here to stay. And I think even in any challenge that that come through, the BMW Group still remains committed to this country.
The company is currently employing more than 42,000 people from around Pretoria. This after it introduced a 24-hour, 3-shift operation in 2012.
We were one of the first in 2012 to come up with a 3-shift operation. So at the time we added 600 jobs to the existing number of employees within the BMW stable.
BMW says it hopes to increase its production from 68,000 to 70,000 units per year.
They looked at plants that produce cars with the least defects into markets such as the USA and so forth. So that, I think, shows just why the BMW brand is such a unique brand. We offer premium products and quite a high versatility of what you can get within our models that are sold locally and worldwide.
The company says it has good relationship with Labour and it has no plans of leaving South Africa, saying conditions in this country are conducive for business.
France has increased the pressure on Burundian stakeholders with a Security Council draft resolution that warns the government to cooperate with regional mediation efforts and for all parties to reject violence. Tension has been escalating with fears of return to an ethnic-based war in that country.
After an urgent session of this council where UN officials again warned of a Burundi on the brink, France circulated what could be the firmest response from the UN body to date.
We call on all parties to reject violence and to convene an inter-Burundian dialogue. We welcome the appointment of a special advisor by the Secretary General to coordinate UN efforts in response to the situation. We express our intention to consider additional measures, including targeted sanctions against all Burundian actors whose actions and statements contribute to the persistence of violence and impede the search for a peaceful solution.
But Russia's deputy permanent representative earlier shot down the idea of sanctions.
The team have to contribute. To work very actively with both sides, or with many sides, but not only with the government. We should find an approach that contributes to the political process, to a peaceful settlement.
Could sanctions help?
No.
A question we put to the French.
This issue is currently discussed among member states. But the point, I think, which is important that we have to keep in mind, it is that this very idea, this notion of targeted sanctions, the threat of targeted sanctions, is something which has been raised by the African Union itself, and it comes actually from statements issued by the Peace and Security Council in Addis Ababa.
Now threatening sanctions as a tool to force change on the ground, but without consensus here, the task of breaking the cycle of violence in Burundi could prove that much tougher. Sherwin Briceby's SABC News, New York.
The United States has strongly condemned the shooting at a police academy in Jordan. At least 5 people, including a South African and 2 Americans, were killed. The White House has described the killings as a cowardly act. U.S. President Barack Obama says he is treating it very seriously, the attack at the King Abdullah Training Center in which 3 Jordanians and 1 Lebanese citizen were wounded. A full investigation is underway. A senior Jordanian official said the gunman was a police captain. There was no immediate word on the motive for the attack. Jordan is a staunch U.S. ally in the Washington-led campaign against Islamic State militants who hold large areas of neighboring Syria and Iraq, a position Jordanian officials say leaves the kingdom vulnerable to jihadist attacks. The U.S.-funded Jordan International Police Training Center hosts mainly Palestinian and Iraqi officers. Moscow has acknowledged for the first time that a terrorist attack could have caused last month's Russian plane crash in Egypt. Britain and the United States, as well as international investigators, suspect a bomb exploded on board the Metrojet A321 plane. However, the Egyptian officials insist there is no evidence yet of an attack on the aircraft, which jihadists claim to have downed.
Russia previously refrained from blaming the crash on terrorists until Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev's admission. The crash killed all 224 people on board. A growing international outcry has backed the theory that the plane was down in an attack. The IS group's branch in the Sinai claimed responsibility after the Russian plane crash. The terrorist group said it downed the plane in retaliation for Russia's airstrikes in Syria, but has not revealed how. The IS affiliate in Egypt is waging an insurgency in North Sinai that has killed hundreds of people. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of foreign tourists, including some 80,000 Russians and 20,000 people from Britain, are still stranded in Egypt after flights were cancelled on Friday over security fears. On Monday, Moscow said 25,000 Russian tourists had so far returned on more than 100 flights, while London said 5,000 people from Britain had returned home.
The Festival of Lights, known as Diwali, will be celebrated globally today by Indians worldwide. The 5-day festival of Diwali is one of the most significant festivals in the Indian culture. The word Diwali means rows of lighted lamps, and it is known as the Festival of Lights because houses and shops are decorated with candles and colorful lights. This shows the victory of light over darkness and good over evil. For many Indians, Diwali honors Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, and people will start the new business year at Diwali, and some will say prayers to the goddess for a prosperous year ahead. During Diwali, the families and friends will share sweets, dried fruit and gifts, and many will give food and goods to those who are less fortunate and in need. It is also a time when people spring clean and redecorate their homes and wear new clothes. The dates of Diwali changes each year, as the day it is celebrated in is calculated according to the position of the moon and the Hindu lunar calendar. Now, happy Diwali to all our Hindu friends out there. Now, Eben Janssen is standing by with in-depth interviews and analysis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Salvis. Today, 3 of the 4 police officers implicated in the killing of Khulekani Mpanza are expected to apply for bail in the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court on the West Rand. A question that comes to mind is, are the South African police service members unusually brutal, and if so, why? Police brutality has come under the spotlight with the recent release of a video depicting police conduct against a member of the public. South Africa are said to be twice as lethal as those in the United States and are also 6 times more likely to die on the job. Now, in the 2009-10 year, 2,462 criminal complaints were laid against the South African police. On the other hand, 58 officers were killed this year, 27 on duty, while 31 were off duty, compared to 63 police members killed between April of 2014 and March 2015. Earlier this year, President Jacob Zuma acknowledged South Africa's violent reality and urged police officers to fight back. Taking into account the killing of police and the high level of crime in the country, urgent and decisive action is required to contain the situation. Now, joining us from our studio in Pretoria is the UNISA School of Criminal Justice, Department of Police Practice. We are joined by Professor Rudolf Zinn. A very good morning to you, Professor Zinn. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you.
Lots of stories of police brutality. Let's start at the beginning. How would you define police brutality, Professor?
Well, I think police brutality would be that type of force that exceeds what is expected to be used by the police under the circumstances. And obviously one need then to look at the Section 49 that described the use of force in South Africa. And it's a long debate that's been going on for a number of years. And we've reached the point where we have now consensus on what should be the Section 49 content. And I think that's our guiding document as far as police brutality is concerned.
Professor, can I ask you for your reaction on not the video that we have on screen now, but you know, the one about the execution of a member of the public after he opened fire on a police vehicle about a couple of weeks ago now. Your reaction to this case is also before the courts in Krugersdorp today.
Well, it's very concerning. I think it's clear that there was some misconduct. If one would look at the circumstances, the police explained that they were under fire and that they reacted. But our case law in South Africa is very clear. Legislation is very clear. You can only shoot somebody in self-defense, and especially if you shoot to kill, there will have to be special circumstances that you will be able to prove in a court of law that your own life was under immediate threat, or somebody else's life was under immediate threat. And if one would look at the video itself, it seems to be that when the final 2 rounds were fired at the suspect, this person was already lying on the ground, not even holding the firearm anymore. So it seems to be a case that excessive force was used.
An execution almost, some people are calling it in the media. Now, we're getting reports from the court in Krugersdorp this morning that there are quite a few police officers who've gone out to support their colleagues who are in this video. Are you surprised by that? Are you surprised by this kind of action? And what does it say to you about these police members that are supporting their colleagues?
Well, I think it's concerning. We're not that surprised anymore because the POP crew, the police's own union, said a few days ago that they're now coming out in support of these police officers. But what is concerning here is the fact that there seems to be a huge level of frustration within the South African Police Service itself, amongst its members. It seems to be the reason why they're using this excessive force, and one will have to delve deeper into this and see what is underlying to it. Why do they experience a frustration that the normal process of arresting somebody, taking that person to court, getting a conviction and so on is not working for them, so that they're now reverting to nearly a vigilante type of action, which is very concerning because if we go down that path, we're most likely going to end up alienating the local communities or the broader population from the police service itself.
The criminal that was killed in this instance was clearly seen on video footage firing at a police vehicle. Now, thereafter, he was shot by police. We've on social media seen a lot of support in the public for the behavior of these police officers in this instance. What does that say about the way that the South African public are thinking about this?
Well, I think it's once again a sense of frustration. And it seems to be that people now feel that this is justified if one would take into consideration the high levels of violence in South Africa. But we need to be careful for what we wish for. If we end up with a police service that's got all these powers to even execute somebody, it means that next time that you are caught in a roadblock or that you end up in a situation where you're confronted by the police, that you might be on the receiving end. And it's a very dangerous situation. So I think one needs to go and look at the underlying reasons that we've got a problem with policing in South Africa. Most probably it would come down to the fact that we haven't proper crime intelligence. We would come back to the Richard Mdluli saga. We would come back to a frustrated detective service that cannot actually deal with the crime rate that they have to investigate, and most probably also not receiving information from the public itself.
Those are the only solutions going forward. What else do you think we could do in South Africa to come to terms with both sides of the coin?
Well, I think we need to understand where the police is coming from. We need to realize the fact that nearly every week 2 police officers are killed in South Africa. We need to understand their frustrations with the legislation and how to apply and do law enforcement. But we also need to understand where we come from as a country. Our history, that we ended up with a constitution and that we should be a law-abiding country, and we should go for the rule of law, which I think is the most important aspect that needs to come out of this. And it applies to the police and the public both, so that we apply this and we make sure that we don't end up supporting the police service doing something which is clearly illegal.
Professor, thank you for joining us, giving us a learned view around this issue. Of course, I can tell you that 3 of the 4 police officers implicated in the killing of Khulekani Mpanza, well, they'll be applying for bail in the Magistrates Court in Krugersdorp this morning. Now, our reporter Jacques Steenkamp is at the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court on the West Rand this morning, where these 3 of the 4 police officers implicating in Khulekani Mpanza's killing are applying for bail. This, of course, after this video that you're seeing now went viral recently. There's been a lot of activity outside the court, we can tell you. Lots of police members are there to support, is what Jacques Steenkamp is reporting. Let's have a look at some of the views on social media that we've seen coming in around this case. There you see a picture from Jacques that is in the court. And Jacques Steenkamp says Regional Court 2 at the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court is already packed. Now, a very emotive case where, this one there, Jacques tweets one from outside. Thus far, only about 50 SAPS members are gathered outside the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court. This, of course, in support of 3 members, who are now standing accused of murder. And Jacques goes on to say profit from T-shirt sales will be given to the families of the 4 SAPS officers charged with murdering Khulekani Mpanza. There is the T-shirt in question. And the police are asking you, who must die? Police killers must fall, they say. This, of course, the man was seen clearly firing at a police vehicle. Jacques Steenkamp says one of the shirts worn by supporters of the 4 officers charged with murdering Khulekani Mpanza. Of course, it's a very emotive issue here in South Africa, as you heard earlier. Two police officers are being killed every week in this country. Let's now take a look at our picture of the day. Now, this one comes from Njabulu, and it's captioned, UJ bus has been burnt down. Aaron Rensburg listens until things get out of hand, he says. That's the picture. The hashtag is Occupy UJ, and this is a picture of a bus that's been burnt. Satellite here on campus. That looks very much like the Auckland Park campus here in Johannesburg. Let's move on and take a look at the front pages from around the globe now. We'll start in Europe, where the Times reports that Russia faces a ban from the Olympics in Rio next year, after investigators found that it sabotaged the London 2012 Games by running a state-sponsored doping program. Then we move to New York, where the International New York Times reports that tens of thousands of desperate South Sudan civilians have sought safety in a swamp that is full of dangers, but none that compare to the atrocities they fled. Then finally, we move to China, where the South China Morning Post says police in mainland China, Hong Kong and Taiwan have helped crack several gangs based overseas operating phone scams, with hundreds of arrests already made in all 3 countries. Time now for a quick look at what is happening in the courts today. We start, of course, in Krugersdorp. Our top story also, there you have it. 3 of the 4 police officers implicating in the killing of Khulekani Mpanza are expected to apply for bail in the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court. A 4th officer, who is the only female officer among the accused, was granted 5,000 rand bail last week. Now, CCTV footage caught the officers gunning down the suspect before killing him. We showed you the video on the show at the time, and I can tell you that it's clear that the criminal, the man who died in this case, fired at least 4 or 5 shots at a police vehicle before the incident. Then, also in the Pretoria High Court, sentencing proceedings are set to begin for the uncle of 4-year-old Jasmine Pretorius, that is, who pleaded guilty to charges of rape and murder. Jasmine went missing in December of 2013. Her body was later discovered hidden under a bed in her uncle's apartment in Brakpan on the East Rand. Very sad story that was. Time for us now to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
At Philips, we wake up every morning and ask, how can innovation make a difference to you? How can thousands of LEDs bring the pyramids to life and light up hearts? How can an air fryer make delicious traditional meals with up to 80% less fat? How can portable ultrasound be part of a program to help lower infant mortality in Uganda? Because the only innovation that really matters is innovation that matters to you. Innovation and you. Philips.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom. Now, with South Africa being one of the most unequal societies in the world, there is no doubt that South Africans can benefit from a national minimum wage. This, as there have recently been renewed calls for a national minimum wage to be implemented. Researchers at Wits University's Economic Research Organisation, Corporate Strategy and Industrial Development came out in favour of a national minimum wage instead of sector-specific minimum wages last week. Now, earlier this year, French economist Thomas Piketty also stressed the potential role a national minimum wage can play in tackling stubbornly high levels of inequality in South Africa. Now, to tell us a little bit more, we are joined in studio by a senior researcher from Wits's CSID, Lotte Takala-Greenish. And then in Cape Town, we are joined by COSATU's Strategies Coordinator, Neil Coleman. A very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Lotte, if I can start with you, just tell us your research. What is it pointing to?
So we've been looking at the relationship between the increase in wages and the effect on unemployment or employment in general. And we started out trying to explore what is the international evidence. And what emerged very quickly is that the evidence is very mixed. So whilst the dominant view is that an increase in wages causes unemployment, the international evidence is very, very mixed. In some cases, it causes a reduction in employment levels, but an increase in number of working hours. And there are more, if you like, varied or complex adjustment effects. So it's not just employment that we need to look at, but what's happening to different skills, women, informal, formal, and so on.
Neil, if I can come to you, what are the current talks taking place under the National Economic Development and Labour Council around the implementation of minimum wages here in South Africa?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question.
So what are the current discussions that you at COSATU are engaged in around the implementation of minimum wages in South Africa?
Yeah. Well, the discussions taking place in NEDLAC are, of course, between the social partners, looking at how to introduce a national minimum wage, looking at the structure of the national minimum wage, how it would be introduced, what the level would be. There are many sort of fairly complex questions, but at the end of the day, it's about setting a minimum wage floor below which South African workers don't fall. And in the process of that, obviously, we're looking at the structure of the current labour market, which, as you indicated, is highly unequal, but also you have a situation where you have a massive grouping of working poor people in South Africa, many millions of South African workers who are working full-time, but whose families are living in poverty. And the national minimum wage is intended to provide a boost to those poor workers, but also to act as a complement to collective bargaining which would take place in the different sectors.
I would like a response from the both of you, but Lotte, I'll start with you. Thomas Piketty, he was in South Africa recently, and he stressed the potential role national minimum wage can play in tackling inequality in South Africa that we know is at stubbornly high levels. Do you agree with those kinds of sentiments?
I do, and the international evidence points to that as well. So South Africa, as we know, has a relatively high inequality. If we take a standard indicator like the Gini, it's at 0.66, where, for example, Brazil or Indonesia are more around 0.4. In, for example, Brazil and Indonesia, excuse me, an introduction of the minimum wage caused a reduction in this Gini coefficient. So in Indonesia, it came down from 0.46 to 0.41 after the introduction of national minimum wage. So the national minimum wage can be a really important tool to affect inequality.
Your response to that, Neil?
No, clearly it's very important, not only in bringing up the wages of those at the very bottom, but it also has an effect on wages higher up the structure, particularly in the bottom half of the wage structure. So it supports a reduction in inequality between those in the bottom half of the wage structure and those at the top. And what Stats SA's recent evidence shows from 2015 is that the gap in particular between the top 5% of earners and the bottom 5% of earners has increased in the last 4 years from 30 to 1 up to a level of 50 to 1 between the top 5% and the bottom 5%. So the problem is not only bad, but it's getting worse. And clearly the national minimum wage is an important instrument, amongst others, in addressing this inequality problem.
Neil, I want to take you back to what's happened in the mining sector in recent times. In the last couple of years in South Africa, we've seen mining bosses come forward or mining unions come forward and asking for up to 100%, even more than 100% increases in salary for workers in the mining sector. Directly or indirectly, that's still to be discussed. This has led to major retrenchments we've seen and the threat of lots of retrenchments in that sector. Do you have any fears that a minimum wage across the board could lead to job losses in other industries around South Africa?
Well, I think as Lotte has already said, the international evidence very clearly suggests that there's no direct correlation between rising minimum wages and employment loss. In fact, in a number of countries in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and a number of others that we can mention, rapidly rising minimum wages have coexisted with an increase in the employment levels and, in fact, a declining unemployment. So this is about not just a national minimum wage policy, it's about other economic policies that need to complement what is happening in relation to your wage policy. But we must remember that the demands of working people relates to their actual experience of, as I mentioned before, poverty, the fact that they're working long hours but still living in poverty. The majority of workers in South Africa earn below 4,000 Rand a month. Yet the poverty line, which researchers at UCT have developed, indicates that if you earn under about 5,300 Rand for a family of 4, then you're living in poverty. What that means is the vast majority of working people are living in poverty. So the question that we're confronting is how do we move from the situation where we are now to a situation where people are able to earn a decent living? And obviously that has to be a managed process. But a lot of the hysteria about large wage increases for those at the bottom is actually exaggerated. So, for example, in the farming sector, you remember in 2013, in April, May, they introduced a 50% increase in minimum wages in the farm sector. And far from jobs being lost in that sector, we actually discover that now that according to Stats SA, over 150,000 more jobs have been created in the agricultural sector than was the case previously. Now, you could cynically say, well, that was because the national minimum wage was, or the minimum wage was increased. But it's simply not that simple. It relates to trade conditions, industrial policy, demand. It relates to a whole range of complex factors. And that's why we have to have a comprehensive policy which connects to our wage policy to generate employment, but also to generate decent work.
Lotte, just a lot has been said, but I want to take you back to the idea that this could lead to job losses. Just give us your views on that, or retrenchments for that matter.
Okay, well, we've talked quite a lot about inequality, but the elephant in the room is aggregate demand. One of the most important effects of the minimum wage is its effect on demand through increased consumption. So it acts as a sort of redistribution tool, which is great for inequality reduction, but it also acts as a tool to restructure the economy, so you're shifting capital to those who are consuming. Now, this can only be good for firms because they're consuming the products, the goods and services that they themselves also help produce. So consumption, if you like, what we call linkages, is one of the important stimulants to the economy, and we all know the stagnant state of growth and the poor unemployment statistics in South Africa. So this would be a very important tool, among others, as Neil was saying, to restructure and stimulate the economy.
Neil, in conclusion, how soon would you like to see a national minimum wage be implemented?
Well, the agreement amongst the social partners is that we must complete the negotiations by the end of this year, and the President will, with Cabinet, finalise the package towards the beginning of next year, and therefore there's no reason why the national minimum wage can't be introduced next year. This is a matter of urgency, and I think that if there's a political will and the cooperation from the social partners, then there should be the introduction of the national minimum wage in the next 12 months or so.
Neil, thank you very much for that contribution. Coming to you live from Cape Town, Neil Coleman is the Strategies Coordinator for COSATU. Of course, we're talking about the national minimum wage, and I'd like you to wrap up just a reaction to what Neil says about the time frame, the sort of framework that it should be implemented in.
Well, South Africa urgently needs to do something. We've seen what's not happened in the last 20 years with the unemployment. So we already have sectoral minimum wages. The structures are in place. There's a desperate need for a national minimum wage to restructure, redistribute, and reduce inequality.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Senior researcher from Wits's CSID, Lotte Tekala-Greenish, talking to us about national minimum wage. What are your views on it? We'd like to hear from you on Twitter, of course. Don't forget our question of the day. Today, of course, it deals with one of the big developing stories around the world. It's got to do with doping in sport. It seems to be a never-ending problem, something that refuses to go away. So therefore, we ask you this question: can sport still be drug-free? It's a sobering thought, but we'd like you to give us your views on it. At SABC Newsroom, that's where you can send it to us. Now, South Africans will have to brace themselves for another scorching week. The South African Weather Services issued a warning for extremely high temperatures, with the maximums reaching above 40 degrees Celsius in some places around the country. No rainfall is predicted for the rest of the week, and in Gauteng, water restrictions, level 2 water restrictions, are already in place. Some areas are without water. We've got reports of Bedford View in Johannesburg, where tankers are coming in to bring water, and so forth. Lots of different reports. Country struggling with a severe drought. The whole of Southern Africa, really. Lots of tweets coming in. Let's have a look at what some people are reporting on social media with regards to the ongoing drought, the heat wave that seems to carry on. TM talks about takes a severe heat wave to make people realize the importance of drinking water. Humans. Yes, Ms. Tandile, that's unfortunately life, isn't it? Tabu Mafuwani says, maximum temperature of 38 degrees Celsius in the city of Tshwane. As we continue being barbecued, my can continues to fail to deal. He talks about the heat wave. Well, Tabu, prepare for a long week then, my friend. Tara talks about wildly jealous about this Joburg heat wave. I love me some serious heat. Hint, hint, Cape Town. It's not so nice when you're in the middle of it and there's very little water to go around. Letlo Honolo says, the way we're complaining about a heat wave, like temperatures in Limpopo don't reach 40 degrees on a good day. Yes, 40 degrees is you can handle when there's rain in the evenings, but there's nothing. Sandcastle talks about, looks like I'm going to become 50 shades of black, says Sangobo. There's a good sense of humor there. I suppose you've got to have a sense of humor. It's very, very hot here in Johannesburg right now, and well, I can tell you, northern parts of the country, temperatures will soar around 40 degrees for the rest of the week. Now, let's take a look at what's on our Newsroom Facebook page today. Protesting University of Johannesburg students and workers have vowed to continue demonstrating until Vice-Chancellor Aaron Rensburg comes down to their level, they say. They've been protesting at the Kingsway campus here in Auckland Park against the outsourcing of workers at UJ. Then Ghana universities are also set for transformation. 30 years ago, Ghana universities offered little opportunity for those who wanted to study part-time or for those who were elderly, pregnant, ill or disabled. All of that is set to change. Then President Jacob Zuma has been welcomed with a full military parade in Berlin, where he's meeting German Chancellor Angela Merkel a little bit later today. South Africa is Germany's biggest trading partner on the African continent. That's our Newsroom Facebook page. We will be back with you after short break.
The road to greatness is not an easy one. It's rough, tough, and full of barriers. And there's only one way to master it. Never, ever stop. Dauntless. The all-new Audi Q7.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom now. MTN CEO Sfiso Dabengwa yesterday announced his resignation after serving the company for many years. Dabengwa's resignation follows a scandal in which Nigerian authorities imposed a more than 70 billion South African rand fine on the MTN group after the company's failure to deregister unregistered SIM cards. Now, MTN has appointed non-executive chairperson Phuthuma Mhleko to act in Dabengwa's position. Now, to give us a little bit of analysis about this matter, we are joined by Investment Solutions Chief Economist Lesiba Motata, who's with me here in our Johannesburg studio. Very good morning to you, Lesiba. Thank you for joining us.
Cool, yes.
I want to ask you quickly, before we go into the reasons, give me the market and your reaction to firstly the resignation and also then the interim appointment.
It makes sense, you know, if you had levied with a bill as much as 5.2 billion US dollars,
yes,
under your steer of something that actually you should have picked up. You operate in a different country to your home country. More vigilance was required. It makes sense that he had to resign. But the appointment of the former CEO, who has done a stellar job in his tenure, makes sense in that the MTN leadership understand what's happening. It's a corporate with clever people. They will do the right things, and this is a good way of actually dealing with this crisis.
Now, the shareholders it looks like they are going to have to swallow a smaller dividend this year, by the looks of it. Do you think this comes on the back of a lot of shareholder pressure, maybe, or not?
Definitely. If I was holding shares in MTN, and there's a leader who seemingly now has made it's a very expensive era of judgment.
Yes.
So you'll need a different kind of leadership there, but it's quite a hefty one. If you think about it, it's 38% of MTN's total revenue. This penalty. It's quite a significant one, and if you ask me, I think it's very punitive from the Nigerian perspective to have actually levied such a punishment to MTN. So yeah, so it's a difficult time for that corporate, and I think they'll be thinking about ways of diversifying sources of revenue in different jurisdictions as a result.
The water cooler discussions, of course, have been going on thick and fast around this one. Yeah, in our office, but I'm sure in most offices around the country, because it's such an astronomical fine. And the one question that comes from the water cooler discussion that I want to put to you is that why the group CEO has to step down and not the Nigerian CEO of the business who've gone rather quiet on this matter.
Yeah, so I think it just starts from the top down. It is a South African firm. I do think there will be ramifications. If you think about it, there's a top leader, South African firm, and there's subsidiaries that come as a result from there. It makes sense that that will ripple through in the Nigerian leadership level.
Throwing the leader under the bus, will it suffice?
It is the right thing to do. For corporate, performance is everything. And performance means you need to maximize shareholder value under all circumstances. Different business cycles, different regulatory situations, all those needs to be adhered to in order to maximize shareholder value. If that is not being a fruit, if it's not a product, we have to think long and hard about who we have at the top.
What about this fine? This fine is astronomical, no doubt about it. It's $5.2 million US, 72 point something billion South African rand. MTN have said that they're hoping to have this cut by as much as 60 to 80%. Do you see that happening, or do you see any cut in this fine?
You know what? From my research with some of our brokers in our firm, they confirmed that in 2011, Shell, the oil company, American-based oil, had an oil leak in Nigeria, and it was levied with a $5 billion US fine. It concluded in a few millions, 3.2 million, after all that has been said and done with the regulators.
From 5 billion to 3.2 million?
Yes.
US dollars?
Yes.
So you say there's lots of hope for MTN
So I'm just saying there could be conversations that could ensue in order to make sure that this is just not detrimental for the company. 38% of total income will have to go to this fine. It really is too punitive, and if you ask me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to my mind.
How do you think this kind of thing will affect relations between the countries?
The big elephant in the room, right? Abuja, Pretoria. We are competing, which is a good thing. They are now the largest economy in Africa, $590 billion US. Makes sense, all right? But they are still very an energy-based economy, and there's just this rivalry that cannot be taken away between the two countries, which is unfortunate. I do actually concede that this raises fear for those who want to enter West Africa, because you have to go there with an open mind and being aware of what could happen if you actually do something wrong. So I don't think it helps that relations.
Doesn't at all. In conclusion, I'm making you the group CEO of MTN now. What are you going to do in the next week if you are Mr. Nhleko?
Well, you know what needs to happen now is to have brand discussions in the media. You've got to engage this thing in a very direct way. So he needs to come and engage what's happening with the regulators in a very direct way. But at the same time, you make 5-year plans. And those 5-year plans should include diversifying some of the dependency one has in jurisdictions like Nigeria. It is a frontier market. Rule of law is important. We need to stick to the rules of the country. But if you get levied in this fashion, an outcome we find in Russia is another economy where they muscle out foreign investments. This could be read in that line. So if I was leading this institution, I'll be thinking long and hard of where next am I going to invest.
Well, Lesiba, thank you for joining us. Lesiba Matata is an economist from Investment Solutions here in South Africa, giving us a sobering view of the debacle, the pickle that MTN finds themselves in, and it's a story that we'll keep developing with you over the next over the weeks and months to come, I'm sure. Thank you for joining us once again.
Pleasure, Wayne.
Now we move on. Happy Diwali to everybody. Diwali, of course, is also known as the Festival of Lights. and it commemorates the triumph of good over evil and signifies the return of Rama to his kingdom following 14 years in exile. The day is celebrated by millions of Hindus around the world, and I can tell you there'll be lots of firecrackers doing the rounds in the next 5 days as the festival continues. Let's have a quick look on social media, what people are talking about with regards to Diwali, of course. Happy Diwali to all my friends, says Jalindra Kumar Verma. Ragesh says, thanks to our Karnataka, we are celebrating Diwali without lights. I'm sure he's teaching us tolerance. Yeah, and Ragesh again, thanks to the tolerance of Congress in Karnataka, we will have powerless Diwali. Yes, load shedding going on in the state of Karnataka in India. And Nagesh talks about on the joy occasion of Deepavali. I convey my warm greetings and good wishes to you and everyone of your family. Happy Diwali Bosu. For the next 5 days, the festival of Diwali. And I can tell you for the next 5 days, we're going to be having a heat wave here in South Africa. Meteorologists, well, they've warned that the escalating temperatures across the country could last until the weekend. Many regions across the country are experiencing drought conditions and heat waves with little or no rain expected for the rest of the week. Now, the same meteorologists, they've warned that varying levels of hot and dry conditions may persist until the beginning of autumn next year. They say the conditions will persist the whole of the summer and even spread towards the beginning of autumn. That's in March of next year. People are advised to avoid the heat by staying out of the sun. They should also drink lots of water to avoid dehydration. Meanwhile, the Tshwane Emergency Services Department has warned residents to protect themselves against the excessive heat wave that will lead to dehydration and other weaknesses due to overheating. Emergency services also say that it can be life-threatening for pets, children, adults exercising outdoors, people with respiratory diseases, and the elderly. Now, Philip Walkins is here to tell us this morning, what do we do, Phil? What do we do, my friend? That's the question.
Well, I would say don't exercise outside and in the sun, but I'd be a bit rich coming from doing 94.7 this weekend with a 9 o'clock start time. So, but no, in all seriousness, really stay out of the direct sunlight because not only is there heat stroke, sunstroke is a whole different ball game there. Very easily at this point could people be getting that. And then there are the obvious things. Don't do heavy exercise outside for prolonged periods of time if you know that you have medical weaknesses. So,
before you go to the weather, I want to ask you, we see here there's talk of this carrying on until March of next year. Seriously, give us better news than that, Phil.
Well, the key to that is the varying degrees. So we're likely to go through this again and again. Who knows how many times, really, but it's not going to be a constant heat wave until March next year. So, I mean, we'll see if another cold front or two come by the southern coast. Might just cool us down a little bit quite shortly.
Phil, I hope that Phil Walkins is right, that things will cool down occasionally and we'll get some massive showers to bring the rain that we really need. We really need the rain. Time for us to pray. The calls around the country are for us to start praying for rain because South Africa needs rain. The whole of Southern Africa needs rain. But Phil is here to give us a weather update.
All right, let's take a look at exactly what's going on in your weather for today. We're going to start off with Southern Africa and the surrounding regions. And, of course, this is our rainfall map. This is exactly what's going to be happening for today. We're expecting a little bit of rainfall over South Africa's eastern coastlines. Of course, very, very good news for the KwaZulu-Natal province, which, as we all know, is one of the hardest hit areas there. Now, taking a look towards Windhoek and the surrounding areas, we're also expecting a little bit of rainfall in that area as we look into today. Warmer temperatures are continuing, as we said, throughout South Africa's northeastern areas. Pretoria peaking at around 37 degrees, possibly up to 39, but we'll keep track of that for you. Gaborone peaking at 41 degrees Celsius and a sunny sky as well. So not even cloud cover to break that up for you a little bit there. As you can see, Windhoek was peaking at 35 degrees. Temperatures are going to continue to be warm in that area, but cool down rapidly as we move to this massive body of cloud cover and rainfall. This, of course, being Central Africa. We are expecting that rainfall to last days and weeks, and it is, of course, the wet season in that area. You can see around Kigali and the surrounding areas the concentration of rainfall in that area there. As a result, slightly cooler temperatures. Kigali, in fact, peaking at about 24 degrees. Temperatures moving towards the coastlines, remaining rather mild compared anyway to southern Africa, but nevertheless rising towards that 30-degree mark in Libreville here, and of course Kinshasa at 33 degrees, remaining nice and warm for today. Very, very high humidity forecast for the area. Of course, now we move into the further northern regions, the northeastern regions of southern Africa, should I say. We are expecting very dry conditions there, as always. But towards the Horn of Africa, a little bit towards Sana'a, in fact, in the peninsula there, we are expecting a little bit of rainfall in the area. There's some scattered showers and thunder showers forecast around, very isolated showers as well forecast around Tripoli, not really forecast anywhere else, unfortunately, through the interior of northern Africa here. As we can see, we're expecting very warm temperatures, around 30 degrees in the interior, 34 degrees, 35 degrees, in fact, towards Khartoum, and it is going to remain very, very warm there. Taking a look towards the further western regions of Africa, we're going to see that rainfall returning, of course, though, towards the southern and central regions of the subcontinent here. Lagos expecting a little bit of rainfall there. It intensifies as we move down the coastline and towards the Central African regions, but temperatures remaining very, very warm there. 36 in Bamako, and of course you'll expect temperatures to rise nicely into the higher 20s and early 30s in general throughout the entire region. That's where I'm going to leave your weather for now. Do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up.
Yeah, thank you very much to Phil. Phil will be back a little bit later with another update. It seems to be hot all over. 39 degrees in, well, the interior of the continent, 40 plus here in the northern parts of southern Africa. Let's hope the rain comes soon. But the news update will come soon, 3 minutes to be exact. Don't go away. We'll give you a complete wrap of what's happening in the world at the top of the hour. See you there.
Your destiny is not determined by the township you come from.
The one place we will find movers and shakers is in the township. It's just that they're diamonds in the rough and some of them don't even know it.
Being young with no experience in business is a challenge that Bulelani took upon himself.
I was motivated by the prayer. I was motivated by the love.
To be a novice in business was tough, but experience made him a businessman of note.
It took me 7 years to make my first million. I've got all the scars to prove that I started with nothing.
A journey well traveled.
For me, that is the one major thing. The ability to touch other people's lives. Nothing goes beyond that.
Join your host Puleng Mulebati on Bopilong every Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
The internet has been found to be a tool used by militant groups when recruiting members. This has forced governments to create tighter internet laws. Technology has also been used to call for social change, as was the case with the abducted Nigerian girls.
The people on social media are some of the society's most influential. If they get an issue started, you're likely to have that issue become a national issue.
And on Network, we tell you about this serious side of technology, but we have fun too with gadgets, games and cars. That's Network every Sunday at 19:30, only on SABC News.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 10th of November 2015. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. This is Newsroom. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from Auckland Park Studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. But first, let's take a look at all your headlines. President Jacob Zuma has arrived in Berlin, where he's meeting German Chancellor Angela Merkel for bilateral talks later today. The United Nations Security Council will consider imposing targeted sanctions on stakeholders in Burundi. And Russian authorities have acknowledged that a terrorist attack could have caused last month's Russian plane crash in Egypt. Now, these are some of your stories coming up, but first let's find out from Kendall Bakamate what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. It's been a very heavy and very busy morning already. It is Tuesday and WADA has released its report. In fact, before I get ahead of myself, let me tell you what we've got for you in the sports today. The World Anti-Doping Agency calls for Russia to be banned from all athletic events over widespread doping offences. German FA President Wolfgang Nietzbach resigns amid allegations that Germany bought the rights to host the 2006 World Cup. Also, Hanneke Meyer's future Springbok coach suffers yet another blow as the Western Cape ANC calls on Saru not to renew his contract. And don't forget the question of the day: can there be drugs-free sports? Back to you, Ross.
Thank you, Kendall, and you can let us know what's on your mind on that Twitter feed. Now, President Jacob Zuma has been welcomed with a full military parade in Berlin, where he's meeting the German Chancellor Angela Merkel later today. South Africa is Germany's biggest trading partner on the African continent, but this is the first time these two world leaders are engaging in direct bilateral talks.
President Zuma arrived into a wet Berlin, but his spirits will be far from dampened as he makes his state visit here. Germany is rolling out the red carpet for him when the meetings get underway fully today with full military honours. He's meeting with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel to discuss the deepening trade ties between the two countries.
What we're doing is bringing our business people together. We've put together a significant business delegation which is engaged right now in a business forum. And I think what will happen there is we'll find that the conversations that are already taking place between South African and German business people will be deepened and strengthened. And that's what we look to as an outcome here.
There are over 600 German companies operating in South Africa, providing at least 100,000 jobs. It's a beneficial setup for both countries. But this visit won't only focus on trade relations.
Over the last months and years, Germany has more and more been openly criticizing the way the South African government and the ANC has been handling corruption issues. So trade is going to be very important, of course, but there are going to be more tricky issues on the agenda as well.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the South African President Jacob Zuma are holding their meetings here at the Bundeskanzleramt in Berlin behind me. They'll be hoping that these meetings won't only improve trade ties, but will secure the political relationship between the two countries into the future. Jack Parrick, SABC News, Berlin.
A French draft resolution introduced on Burundi in New York followed calls from various UN officials for the Security Council not to underestimate what is at stake in the country. During an urgent session of the Council, the Under-Secretary General for Political Affairs warned of police activities that often cross the line. The High Commissioner for Human Rights urged the Council to consider sanctions to prevent a regional conflict.
The stakes are high in Burundi, and with a rising death toll and growing regional humanitarian crisis, the Council is being implored to take firm action.
I appeal to you to keep Burundi at the top of your agenda and to explore all possible options to prevent further violence, including steps to freeze the assets of those who would incite or engage in violence, and possible travel bans. The Council may also wish to consider invoking Chapter 7 of the Charter to stop the ongoing violence and prevent a regional conflict.
Officials have long urged an inclusive dialogue to take place among Burundi stakeholders, the disarming of the Imbonerakure government-aligned militia, and inflammatory statements by leaders to cease. Doubts have also been cast on the recently established Commission for Inter-Burundian Dialogue.
While the UN in general supports national dialogue efforts, this commission will not be able to make progress in the tense security context where members of political parties and civil society are frequently found dead on the streets. With many media outlets closed down since spring and opposition leaders abroad afraid to return home, the government has not established the conditions for credible and inclusive political dialogue.
As fear grows, the country could descend into a full-blown ethnically based civil war. All eyes now on how the draft will proceed in the Security Council. Shervin Brycepease, SABC News, New York.
Members of the SAPS have barricaded both sides of the parking lot of the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court in Johannesburg. Now, this comes ahead of this morning's court appearance of the 3 of the 4 members implicated in the killing of robbery suspect Kulakani Mpanza. Some unions have urged their members to go to court to show solidarity with the suspects. Constable Titus Mabela, Jason Seholo and Sergeant Pulang Sabetwa were last week charged with murder and defeating the ends of justice. They were denied bail and are expected to apply for bail today, while Constable Depua Chipo is only facing a charge of defeating the ends of justice. She was released on bail of 5,000 rand. Police management yesterday sent out a stern warning to all its officers who are thinking of joining the unions outside court today in support of the suspects, saying they will face possible prosecution. 31 lawmakers from Tunisia's ruling Nda Tunis party have resigned from their parliamentary bloc. They accused the president, Beji Siat Etsepsi, his son Hafet, of trying to seize control of the party.
Tunisia has enjoyed a period of political stability following its transition into democracy after its 2011 uprising ousted autocrat Zine Abdine Ben Ali. But earlier this month, brawling broke out between the two factions of the Nida Tournes party over what critics say were attempts by SABC's son to seize control. The resignation may complicate attempts to push through reforms that Tunisia's international lenders are demanding to curb public spending and kickstart an economy hit by 2 major militant attacks this year. The camp led by the president's son is pushing for a larger role through a party restructuring. Critics say they have not recognized the executive committee as the legitimate body to manage party affairs.
We feel compelled to resign from our parliamentary group as a first step to stand for democracy and for the credibility of our work as parliamentarians. Even though we have taken this position and that things are complicated, we are still open for discussion and reform.
Nida Tournes, founded by SABC, emerged as a political force in 2013 to lead popular protests against the Ennahda government. After the resignations, the Ennahda Islamist Party has 67 seats and Nida Tournes 54 seats in parliament.
The United States has urged people in Myanmar to be patient and not prejudge the final outcome of Sunday's election, which there's calls for peaceful and historic vote. Now, a final tally is not expected for several days. The Burmese opposition party, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, has won most of the seats announced so far. The White House spokesperson, Josh Earnest, has welcomed statements that both sides have made. A spokesman for Aung San Suu Kyi's opposition National League for Democracy projected that the party had won 80% of the vote nationwide. This is, however, based on its unofficial data collected from polling stations across the country. The leader of the military-backed ruling party effectively conceded defeat when he said his party had lost more seats than it had won. In early results from Sunday's vote, billed as the country's freest in a generation, the National League for Democracy had won 78 of the 88 seats. Hundreds more results, including many from remote areas with poor infrastructure, need to be announced before the full picture can become clear. Parliamentary staff are threatening to bring the institution to a standstill here in South Africa in Cape Town. The workers downed tools in protest against poor working conditions. Parliament says it has contingency plans to mitigate any disruptions. The standoff between NHAU staffers and Parliament may continue today if a meeting between management and union representatives does not deliver on the workers' key demands. The workers' demands relate to conditions of service, including an agreement on performance bonuses payments, as well as the suspension of staff vetting until proper consultation with the staff has been made. The trade union NHAU workers protested at Parliament and embarked on illegal strike action yesterday. However, Parliament says that there are contingency plans and hopeful there will be a speedy resolution. Moscow has acknowledged for the first time that a terrorist attack could have caused last month's Russian plane crash in Egypt. Britain and the United States, as well as international investigators, suspect a bomb exploded on board the Metrojet A321 plane. However, Egyptian officials insist there is no evidence yet of an attack on the aircraft, which jihadists claim to have downed.
Russia previously refrained from blaming the crash on terrorists until Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev's admission. The crash killed all 224 people on board. A growing international outcry has backed the theory that the plane was down in an attack. The IS group's branch in the Sinai claimed responsibility after the Russian plane crash. The terrorist group said it downed the plane in retaliation for Russian airstrikes in Syria, but has not revealed how. The IS affiliate in Egypt is waging an insurgency in North Sinai that has killed hundreds of people. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of foreign tourists, including some 80,000 Russians and 20,000 people from Britain, are still stranded in Egypt after flights were cancelled on Friday over security fears. On Monday, Moscow said 25,000 Russian tourists had so far returned on more than 100 flights, while London said 5,000 people from Britain had returned home.
The States has strongly condemned the shooting of a police academy in Jordan. At least 5 people, including a South African and 2 Americans, were killed. The White House has described the killings as a cowardly act. U.S. President Barack Obama says that he's treating very seriously the attack at the King Abdullah Training Center, in which 3 Jordanians and 1 Lebanese citizens were wounded, or 1 citizen rather were wounded. A full investigation is underway. A senior Jordanian official said the gunman was a police captain. There was no immediate word on the motive for the attack. Jordan is a staunch U.S. ally in the Washington-led campaign against Islamic State militants who hold large areas of neighboring Syria and Iraq, a position that Jordanian officials say leaves the kingdom vulnerable to jihadist attacks. The U.S.-funded Jordan International Police Training Center hosts mainly Palestinian and Iraqi officers. Back home now, here in the Eastern Cape province, they are commemorating World Mental Health Day today. The theme for this year is Dignity in Mental Health. This year, the World Health Organization will be raising awareness of what can be done to ensure that people with mental health conditions can continue to live with dignity through human rights-oriented policy and law, training of health professionals, respect for informed consent of treatment, inclusion in decision-making processes, and public information campaigns. Now, for more on this, we are joined by our reporter Busi Jamsana, who's live in East London. A very good morning to you, Busi, and can you tell us what is currently happening there?
A very good morning, Elvis. Indeed, the Health Department is commemorating World Mental Health Day here today in Zwelitsha, here in the Eastern Cape. The main objectives are to make sure that it builds an awareness to the public, that it does away with marginalizing, stereotyping, and basically putting aside mentally ill people, mentally ill patients. But what seems to be the problem here in the Eastern Cape is the lack of capacity to cater for those who are affected by mental illness. There is a dire shortage in the Eastern Cape hospitals to cater for those who are mentally ill. Those who are not able to sleep in the hospitals here in the Eastern Cape are forced to stay in safe institutions, but it is a major concern. But to tell us more on just how big the problem is, we are joined by the Health MEC, Dr. Phumza Dyantyisa. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. We know that you've identified the shortage of beds as a major problem here in the Eastern Cape. Just how big is the shortage?
The shortage is quite huge, but there are some interventions that we've been embarking on as the department. You'll remember that we inherited 4 hospitals, the Tower, Komani, the Elizabeth Duncan. Those were hospitals that were really not properly utilized, still not suitable for keeping the people with mental illnesses. We've since embarked then on revamping these hospitals. The last of the projects that we are going to be doing is a project of removing the Elizabeth Duncan, moving it to Doranginza, a project that is already on tender, 600 million. We have a project in Lebode, again, a 30-bedded unit. We have a project, again, that we are going to be embarking on in Cecilia Makiwane, which will be phase 2 of Cecilia Makiwane, 100-bedded. We are working closely with NGOs and NPOs whose facilities are being funded by the Department of Health to improve the situation on the ground. We know that the mentally ill people are taken as people that can no longer be part of the communities. The awareness we are making today is to say to the people, a mentally ill person needs and deserves the dignity that is afforded to other people. There are many causes of these mental illnesses, some biological, some psychological, and some social. You'll find somebody who was, maybe a teacher, who you see at times that because of some social ills, he gets to be mentally ill. Those are people that we think they should be taken and be taken to the society, to the communities, and get involved in day-to-day activities. We see a lot of people roaming around, but we do have facilities that take care of those people that they see roaming around. The problem at times, it is the mentally ill person has the rights. And therefore, you cannot just take a mentally ill person that you see on the street and take her straight to a psychiatric hospital without the consent of the family. That is normally the problem that we have. We are embarking on an awareness campaign. That is why today, the 10th, which is a World Mental Health Day, we have come here to Zwelitsha. We are trying to get the communities to understand mental illness. We want people to stop stigmatizing the mentally ill people.
Interesting that you're saying that they should be absorbed in communities and play just as equal role as other people play in societies. But most of the times they are violent, they do all sorts of things. How do communities deal with this?
You know, we've got 28 facilities in the province that have been designated to assess the mentally ill people. That is the 72-hour assessment before they can be transferred. Because at times you are not mentally ill. It may be just another disease that is making you to look like a person who's mentally ill. That's why that assessment, so that they can be categorized and sent to different areas. People who deal in the awareness, you are told on how to handle people. That is why we have those designated areas where you can take so that they can be assessed. Then you know that this person is mentally ill.
We've seen a lot of them, Doc, roaming around the streets, as you mentioned. They are associated with being dirty and all sorts of things. What about them once they're turned away from the hospitals because of the shortage of beds? What happens to them? Is there any intervention to take them off the streets, perhaps put them in a temporal structure whilst you're still revamping these hospitals?
There are some institutions, like I said, the NGOs and NPOs, like some other facilities where the people can be taken to and get assessment there. We have a few of them in the province. We've got a lot. We've got about 60 NGOs around the province that help the province, that help the department to cater for these people who are mentally ill.
Quite a mouthful and a lot of information, Doc. Because of time, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. That was the Health MEC, Dr. Phumza Janji, telling us about the plans they have in place to make sure that they increase the number of beds in hospitals, to make sure that they cater for mentally ill patients, also building awareness to societies that it's not just a government responsibility, but there are also NGOs there in place to cater for the mentally ill people. Also, communities should play a role in making sure that they feel part of the societies they live in. With that, it's back to you in studio.
Thank you, Busisiwe Jemsana, live in East London. But right now, it's time to find out from Kendall Makamate what's in the sports news.
Thank you very much, Elvis, and hearty good morning to you all. The World Anti-Doping Agency has called to ban Russia from all international athletics, and there's a chance that Russian athletes will not see the Olympic Village in Rio de Janeiro next year.
The World Anti-Doping Agency wants Russia's Athletic Federation banned from all international competition after a report into drug misuse found evidence of widespread doping. The agency described what it called a deeply rooted culture of cheating in Russian athletics and systemic failures by global authorities to stop it.
We discovered information that not only related to sport corruption in the general sense of it, but also to possible criminal actions as well.
But the decision to suspend Russia can be made only by the International Association of Athletics Federations. Its president, Sebastian Coe, says Russia has until the end of the week to respond.
This is a 320-page report. We will have to absorb that. There will be lessons in this for all of us. And we will take those lessons. We will take those lessons. No, we will take those lessons. I want to hear what the Athletics Federation of Russia is actually saying in answer to those allegations.
But the Russian sport minister, Vitaly Mutko, denies the allegations, although he has been singled out as being both aware of and complicit in the doping scandal.
Now, this all comes after the commission set up by WADA reported these allegations of widespread corruption and collusion by Russian officials, including state security services. Now, systematic failures at athletics world governing body, the IAAF, were also identified. Only the IAAF has the power to ban Russia from international competition, and the new president, Sebastian Coe, has given the country until Friday to respond formally to the allegations. The federation itself has been rocked by a French investigation into fraud involving its former chief, Lamine Diack. Russia won 8 Olympic gold medals at the London Games, amongst 17 medals in athletics. The commission said in its report that the 2012 Olympics had been sabotaged by the widespread inaction of international and national anti-doping authorities. Now, global police body, Interpol, said they would be coordinating an investigation into suspected corruption and doping involving athletes as well as athletics officials. However, the Russian sports ministry labeled the allegations as absolutely baseless. Now, we are going to be chatting to Manfred Sadler shortly, but before we do that, and while he gets himself ready and gets mic'd up, let's give you another story that's actually been hitting the headlines. German FA President Wolfgang Nießbach has resigned over a 2006 World Cup scandal, buckling under mounting pressure from an issue that has tarnished the reputation of the world's biggest national soccer federation. Now, Nießbach, under investigation for tax evasion in relation to the affair, said he was taking the responsibility for a controversial $7.22 million payment to FIFA, allegedly using the bribe to officials of World Soccer's governing body to vote for Germany's World Cup hosting bid. At the heart of the investigation is a 2005 payment from the DFB, an alleged return on a loan from then Adidas CEO Robert Louis Dreyfus to help buy votes for Germany's successful World Cup bid at the FIFA selection in 2000. Last week, more than 50 police and tax investigators raided the DFB headquarters, as well as the homes of Niesbach and other officials. They were searching for evidence to back up suspicions by the Frankfurt prosecutor's office that Niesbach, a 2006 World Cup organizing committee vice president, Zwanziger, did not pay on the $7.2 million payment. The DFB and Niesbach and the then organizing chief Franz Beckenbauer rejected the votes for cash claims. Now, we know Eben is standing by to just bring it all together. Eben, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. Kendall will be bringing that interview shortly, but we've got a developing story right now. The Department of Defense and Arms Corps is about to brief the media on reports that there are plans to buy a 4 billion rand VIP jet. The department last week published a request for information from the market with regard to capacitating the VIP fleet. The media briefing is taking place at the Air Force Base at Waterkloof. Let's now cross to this briefing in Pretoria.
Don't say it's like disorganization with your own. Okay. Sir, may I invite you to...
No, thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. Good morning to all of you, and welcome. I'm just about to read the press statement, and it reads as thus. Internationally, Africa is perceived as a continent with huge untapped potential. It is therefore high on the international agenda. South Africa is perceived as either one of the key players on the continent or, for some, the gateway to Africa. From this perspective, South Africa must have an excellent capability to maintain diplomatic relations with BRICS, the African Union, African nations, and others. Related activities can take the form of, for example, trade delegations to South Africa's trading partners, diplomatic interventions between conflicting sides on the African continent, or participating in urgent international security planning sessions. Promoting security in Africa has a major and long-term peace dividend. The return on investment in security for Africa and Southern Africa is substantial. The South African Air Force is required to provide a mission-ready intercontinental air transport capability at all times. The requirement is urgent and important. Over the past few years, the availability of the intercontinental aircraft of the South African Air Force has been problematic, making it difficult for the SAF to fulfill its responsibility and mandate. The absence of the Boeing business jet and other VVIP aircraft for 4 months at a time during the scheduled maintenance periods aggravates the vulnerability of the South African Air Force in providing the indicated service. The chartering option provided unreliable and introduces certain risks. There is an increased requirement for long-range flights to the Far East and other parts of the world. During such long flights, teams should be able to work and have the ability to communicate securely. In the case of flights involving representatives of the RSA, interacting with other countries, the ability to arrive fresh at the destination across the multiple time zones is critical. The South African Air Force, therefore, has a need to increase their current capability to provide intercontinental air transportation to members of the South African government. The current fleet of the VVIP aircraft cannot sustain the current air transport requirements from the South African Air Force VIP clients as tasked. The aircraft is operated by 21 Squadron at Air Force Base Waterkloof in Centurion, Pretoria. The operating conditions out of this base have a key effect on the ability of the aircraft to achieve maximum payload range due to the density altitude constraints during the hot summer months. The required operational capability, which we normally call the ROC, for the capacitation of the VVIP transportation dates 24 January 2012 was approved. The additional capacity will complement the current capability. Therefore, the request for information, which we call the RFI, is intended to provide information on both a 5,500 nautical miles and a 7,200 nautical miles capability with 18 or 30 passengers respectively. The published request for information is aimed at obtaining information that will assist AMSCO in identifying possible options to satisfy the South African Air Force's requirement to expand their current intercontinental VVIP transport capability. The RFI aims to obtain information on the affordability of different options and different finance options of the eventually selected option. It is not a binding document, please take note. The leasing of used aircraft as an interim solution is an option to ensure availability of aircraft by March 2016, possibly followed by the purchasing of long-term solutions. Once the information has been received and analyzed, the tender process will start with what we call the request for proposal. With that, I end this press statement.
Thank you very much, Ken. I will then request the CEO of AMSCO, Mr. Kevin, to actually give us the details of where we are and what this RFI means in the process that we are engaged in. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilford.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity, Chief. What we're going to talk to are the issues around the RFI and what informs the RFI. So let's move to the first slide. What is being required? Where does the money come from? All the questions being asked in the press currently. Why the specific layout? Why the size? Why not a commercial airline or charter? Why not a current aircraft? And why buy and not lease? Firstly, let us say that this is meant to be a national asset for the purposes of VIP leadership within government and for usage to do and to perform a variety of functions. And the General has already spoken to those activities which are escalating, in particular with our role in Africa, but also with our growing trade with the East. So, current workload and availability, a single aircraft is simply not a reliable solution in terms of what we have at the moment. The aircraft has a service cycle, and we all know what that means. One may have failures, and we admit to those. And the demand may be more than one simultaneous deployment. Sorry. It's okay. I wish I knew it off by heart, but I don't. Okay, I think I've got it. Yeah, we can go to the beginning so that everyone can tape it. Could we go back, please? Right, first slide. Okay, the scope of the RFI looks into what has been acquired, where does the money come from, why the specific layout, why the size, why not a commercial airline or charter, why not the current aircraft, and why buy and not lease. You can turn that if you want to, I can now see. Right, so we're looking at the purchase of a national asset with global and continental utility. Bearing in mind that there's a demand, particularly with our escalating role in Africa and our growing trade with the East. Current workload and availability. The view is that a single aircraft is simply not a reliable solution. And we've seen why not in the past. We've had to charter, we've had to hire, we've had to rent, with all kinds of issues surrounding that, in particular security issues. The aircraft has a service cycle, the current aircraft, so if it's been serviced or repaired, then what do you do if you have two imperatives or even one? One may have failures, which we've had in the past. So you need to mitigate against those risks. The demand may be more than one simultaneous deployment. And we've seen that in terms of a variety of senior government leaders. So why do we need capability? Why not the current aircraft and why the size? Because those are some of the questions coming up. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is a request for information. I don't know where the 4 billion comes from, because quite frankly, we can't afford that. We're looking at a whole variety of options, but we are seeking information to establish the facts. And until we've established the facts, and Armscor has very competent engineers, scientists, defense analysts, and of course people who can crunch the numbers. And we're not going to do anything irresponsible. That I can guarantee you of. So why do we need the capability? Firstly, South Africa's intercontinental role, visibly, and it was mentioned by the General, BRICS and the G20 is growing. Diplomacy, trade delegations, urgent visits. One of our generals had to be scrambled out of Africa to get to New York to the UN on an urgent matter. The jet was used for that purpose. These are realities we face every single day in the Defence Force. RSA's continental role, and you will know that our role is growing massively. The AU must react to a continental crisis, and we play a significant role within the AU, the African Union. The South Africa plays a central role in the Africa Standby Force, and we've just seen what has happened at Luatla, where we are already working together to find out what are the issues of interoperability, etc. Urgent meetings in Addis Ababa, multinational planning en route to regional briefings. People don't sit on the plane and do nothing. They work. So when they get there, they're prepared. They have wireless communication. They have satellite telecoms, because they need to be speaking to leaders of other nation states. This certainly isn't a toy. This is a strategic asset of the state. RSA diplomacy for crises on the continent, and you've seen those, and we have to get to them. We can't sit by a few thousand miles away. We need to get there and to be part of conflict resolution. Why not commercial airlines? Why not charters? Firstly, commercial airlines don't fly to all destinations, particularly in Africa. And you have a situation where you sometimes even have to fly via Europe to come all the way back into, say, Central Africa. The reaction times aren't quick enough. A day in a coup d'etat is a long time. The security of flights. We must make sure our leaders are secure. And that's why the Air Force is the custodian of the fleet. No one else is the custodian. It's the Air Force. Onboard productivity. Imagine trying to work on a commercial flight when you're needing to engage with your team. You can't do that. And certainly you'll be breaching every secret and classified protocol if you were. And onboard security. And I don't need to elaborate on onboard security. We've just seen what happened in Egypt to a commercial airline. So where does the money come from, and why buy not lease? It's an RFI, a request for information. Already people in the press are speaking about a purchase. We don't know what the form of ownership is going to be. There are so many forms of ownership. There's buy to lease, or lease to buy, sorry. There's rental. There's a credit installment arrangement. And there's a straightforward purchase with cash. We don't know what it's going to be, because we haven't got there yet. Affordability will determine the selection of the eventual solution and financing options. And here, let me say to you, we haven't even excluded second-hand aircraft. If you read the RFI, we ask you to cover all options and look into all options. We are being, prudent about how we exercise our planning process on this and our evaluation process. We know that money doesn't grow on trees. And part of our role as the executing authority on this matter is to make damn sure that we are being responsible. We aren't going to be irresponsible. And it is unbelievable to see the trash that's being meted out in some of the media on this matter. Devoid of all truth. Capability is an approved requirement since 2012. So it's not as if everyone ran off and did something in 2012. We are waiting and making sure that we are ready to conduct of this nature. So what stage of acquisition? A request for information is to determine what permutations meet the requirement. Number one. What are the platform requirements? Are we going to go for a wide body or a narrow body? Obviously a wide body is more expensive, whether it be second-hand or new. A narrow body is cheaper, but it doesn't have the range of a wide body. Can we attach new fuel systems to the aircraft? These are all things we're looking for in the RFI.
What are the financing options? And I've spoken to them. Purchase, lease to buy, lease. It may even be a credit installment arrangement. We don't know. And we'll only know once we have the facts. But the driver of this, and this is a capability imperative, it's a priority. And if you consider our trade with Africa, you must never discount the return on investment we get. The DRC alone, 24 billion rand per annum for South Africa's exports into the DRC. 140,000 jobs linked to those exports. And if you see the peace dividend that's coming through, particularly from countries where we've been doing conflict resolution and peacekeeping, the return is massive. It will pay for this many times over. So finally, let me say this. We aren't going to be irresponsible. Once we have all the information, then we'll consider the facts and we will liaise with the client. This is my client, the Air Force and the Department of Defense. And then we'll decide how to move forward. But it'll be a clinical and rational and responsible process. It will not be a process as depicted by some people in the press. It will not be an irresponsible process. And RFI, remember, is to test the market in terms of availability and product options and is not binding. So we may, at the end of all of this, say, we're going to have to wait a bit longer, or we may say, let's move forward with the following, which is a request for offers. An RFO is specific in terms of requirements and responses to the RFO entails a binding offer to supply. So it starts becoming legalistic at that point. At this point, that's all it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's all it is. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Mr. Wakeford. I'm now going to open the floor for questions. We will take 3 questions as a pledge, and you know the ritual. Your name, your media, and your question. I will start on my left. The lady there, my dear, you can continue.
I just find out when you say
Can't hear.
Pardon? Sorry, can you raise your voice sound, please?
Okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. From A97. I just want to find out from you if this aircraft is being purchased. Are we looking at other options like using it as a multi-purpose jet? Also, I just wanted to clarify the issue of the range as well.
I saw Brian Hoskins.
Brian Hoskins of the Times newspaper. Questions about the Air Force and to Arms Corps. In terms of current status of maintenance on the VIP jets, what maintenance is being done? When will those aircraft become serviceable, and how long can they continue to be used for before they need to undergo maintenance again? And then to Arms Corps, what is the budget that you're looking at? We're hearing a figure of 4 billion rand, and that figure seems to be quite reliable in what you're looking at. But what is the budget that Arms Corps is looking at in terms of buying the new VIP jet?
Thank you, Graham. Any take on that side? I'll go to Erica Gibson.
Erica Gibson from Union 24. I would like to ask 2 questions. What is the significance of March 2016 that you mentioned? And the second place, can you give us an indication of how many trips and how many flying hours did Inquiry undertake transcontinentally in the past year?
Thank you, Erica. I'll take one last one first. Kim Kelly, this is probably more to Oxford than to you, journalists now. We all know, well, not all of us, most of us are aware that the capacitation or the approval for this was granted as far back as 2012. Why does there now suddenly seem to be this major rush in that the RFI must be submitted by no later than this month? Why now, after 3 years of virtually nothing happening, is it now suddenly happening? And then the second part of my question, will this be, as Dr. Sector Kalubi has alluded to, become a scam project? Thank you. Thank you very much. The panel may respond in
After you. Okay. Multi-purpose. Okay. Do you want to answer? No? Do you want to answer? Multi-purpose. Okay, to Anne and 7 on the multi-purpose possibilities. We can't rule that out. We've got to look to whatever productivity options there are, and hence the RFI. If there's a solid case for a multi-purpose type aircraft, we would certainly give it consideration. On the issue of range, ideally a wide body gets you further, but of course it all links itself to affordability. So if we cannot afford a wide body, then we will go with a narrow body. It's as simple as that. That's the reality we face in terms of the business. It can't be irresponsible. General, I just want to add to that.
Thank you very much. With regards to the range, we talk about 5,500 nautical miles. It gets into Europe comfortably. 7,200 nautical miles gets you to New York, to Beijing, Tokyo, to Sydney, Melbourne, without any challenges, a direct flight. With regards to the maintenance cycle, as you are aware, the Nkwazi, the 737, was manufactured in 2001, the Falcon 900, 1991, the Falcons 50s that we have, one was manufactured in 1982 and the other one in 1983. When we look at the aircraft that we have, the general life, the life of an aircraft is about 20 to 30 years. When you look at these aircrafts that we have, I have now reached past, or have gone past the midlife, and hence the issues of maintenance, regular maintenance taking place affects the availability of the aircraft. With regards to the details of the maintenance cycle, that of course is something that is managed by our technician, and I don't think it's of any value to people sitting around here. The budget. Sure. Okay.
Just a related answer to the agency that was asked about. I just want to remind everybody that this capability need is not something new. I think you know yourself that almost 2 decades ago, there was a project Jamal, which was supposed to have or capacitate the whole VIP fleet. Unfortunately, for budgetary and other reasons, we only managed to get the BBJ. But the gap remained from that time. So it's not about anything urgent or whatever. But yes, the costs for chartering are also considered. In my personal opinion, speaking personally, if we take all the money that we use to charter, we could have a very good capability in the South African Air Force.
So the question of the budget I'll speak to that. Okay. Just on the question relating to what is the budget, let me tell you that this budget will be determined by what the options are. So, for instance, if you lease, you don't link to the SCAMP at all. You don't link to the capital program at all. Then you link to an operational budget. If you purchase, then you take it out of the capital budget. But the RFI process will bring in a whole lot of options and what the values are, and then we'll look to, let's call it the Department of Defence's piggy bank, and see where and what we can source, and it may even involve violence. In other words,
well, we just want to apologise for the poor audio and at times visual quality on that live crossing. Of course, that's as incoming from Pretoria. That was the Department of Defence and Arms Corps, of course, briefing the media on reports of plans to buy a new VVIP jet. It's almost 11 o'clock. 3 minutes to go before 11 o'clock. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, our Vice President will give us a complete news update.
The road to greatness is not an easy one. It's rough, tough, and full of barriers. And there's only one way to master it. Never, ever stop. Dauntless. The all-new Audi Q7.
Your destiny is not determined by the township you come from.
The one place we will find movers and shakers is in the township. It's just that they're diamonds in the rough and some of them don't even know it.
Being young with no experience in business is a challenge that Bulelani took upon himself.
I was motivated by the prayer. I was motivated by the love.
To be a novice in business was tough, but experience made him a businessman of note.
It took me 7 years to make my first million. I've got all the scars to prove that I started with nothing.
A journey well traveled.
For me, that is the one major thing. The ability to touch other people's lives. Nothing goes beyond that.
Join your host Puleng Mulebati on Bopilong every Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
The latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumela Lezondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
I'm Peter Ngo.
And I'm Babakini Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser Bush Imbev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 10th of November 2015. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. This is Newsroom. In fact, this is the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. But first, let's take a look at all your headlines. President Jacob Zuma has arrived in Berlin, where he's meeting the German Chancellor Angela Merkel for bilateral talks later today. The United Nations Security Council will consider imposing targeted sanctions on stakeholders in Burundi. And Russian authorities have acknowledged that a terrorist attack could have caused last month's Russian plane crash in Egypt. Now, those are all your headlines. Our top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma has been welcomed with a full military parade in Berlin, where he is meeting the German Chancellor Angela Merkel later today. South Africa is Germany's biggest trading partner on the African continent. But this is the very first time these two world leaders are engaging in direct bilateral talks.
President Zuma arrived into a wet Berlin, but his spirits will be far from dampened as he makes his state visit here. Germany is rolling out the red carpet for him when the meetings get underway fully today with full military honours. He's meeting with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel to discuss the deepening trade ties between the two countries.
What we're doing is bringing our business people together. We've put together a significant business delegation which is engaged right now in a business forum. And I think what will happen there is we'll find that the conversations that are already taking place between South African and German business people will be deepened and strengthened. And that's what we look to as an outcome here.
There are over 600 German companies operating in South Africa, providing at least 100,000 jobs. It's a beneficial setup for both countries. But this visit won't only focus on trade relations.
Over the last months and years, Germany has more and more been openly criticizing the way the South African government and the ANC has been handling corruption issues. So trade is going to be very important, of course, but there are going to be more tricky issues on the agenda as well.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the South African President Jacob Zuma are holding their meetings here at the Bundeskanzleramt in Berlin behind me. They'll be hoping that these meetings won't only improve trade ties, but will secure the political relationship between the two countries into the future. Jack Parrick, SABC News, Berlin.
A draft resolution introduced on Burundi in New York followed calls from various UN officials for the Security Council not to underestimate what is at stake in the country. During an urgent session of the Council, the Under-Secretary General for Political Affairs warned of police activities that often cross the line. The High Commissioner for Human Rights urged the Council to consider sanctions to prevent a regional conflict.
The stakes are high in Burundi, and with a rising death toll and growing regional humanitarian crisis, the Council is being implored to take firm action.
I appeal to you to keep Burundi at the top of your agenda and to explore all possible options to prevent further violence, including steps to freeze the assets of those who would incite or engage in violence, and possible travel bans. The Council may also wish to consider invoking Chapter 7 of the Charter to stop the ongoing violence and prevent a regional conflict.
Officials have long urged an inclusive dialogue to take place among Burundi stakeholders, the disarming of the Imbonerakure government-aligned militia, and inflammatory statements by leaders to cease. Doubts have also been cast on the recently established Commission for Inter-Burundian Dialogue.
While the UN in general supports national dialogue efforts, this commission will not be able to make progress in the tense security context where members of political parties and civil society are frequently found dead on the streets. With many media outlets closed down since spring and opposition leaders abroad afraid to return home, the government has not established the conditions for credible and inclusive political dialogue.
As fear grows, the country could descend into a full-blown ethnically based civil war. All eyes now on how the draft will proceed in the Security Council. Shervin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Now, the Central African Republic has been known for its instability. Since the outbreak of violence in 2013, about 6,000 people have been killed and a quarter of the population has been displaced, with more than 400,000 refugees and 300,000 internally displaced persons. Now, although the presidential elections have already been postponed once due to the rise in conflict, the French Defense Minister, Jean-Yves Le Drian, says that the Central African Republic is in a position to hold the planned elections on the 27th of December, a much-needed election to transform the nation and to restore peace and stability. Now, for the latest development on the Central African Republic, we are joined in studio by the leader of the political party known as the Kite Movement, Pascal Bida Koyagbele. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning.
Now, just first and foremostly, can you just give us a background to the situation currently in the CAR? Is it stable?
No, it's totally unstable. So, and we've got these jihadists, we've got support, strong support by France, who used to destabilize the country. The real situation in CAR, it's in fact, it's a war for oil. That's a real problem. The Chinese discovered a lot of oil, a big potential of oil in CAR. We've got more oil in CAR than in Nigeria. And because of this, France would like to control and would like to have, I can say, an exclusivity in terms of exploitation and production of oil. The second problem, they would like to have, to just offer to the country 10% and to get 90% for them. That's the real problem in CAR.
Now, it's a very serious allegation. So what you are saying is that the French want to run the CAR.
Exactly. For example, you can notice that it's a Mr. Le Drian who would like to impose us a date for the election. We are not a colony. The colonization is finished. So it's up to us to decide when we can organize this election. How can you organize election in 1 month? The real problem is that they want to impose their candidates. So now we don't have, there is no security in the country. The rebels, the jihadists, they control 70% of the country. So even in the capital, the government just controls just 20% of the territory of the capital. So there is a big problem. How do you want candidates to do campaign? How do you want people to vote? Majority of the people are in the bush. These jihadists, they used to rape or women or children. And the soldier, the military soldier also, remember there is 3 months ago, these scandals about this French soldier who raped 800 young boys between 6 years old and 12 years old. So there is a very total insecurity in the country. And this insecurity, behind this insecurity, you've got this French military soldier, you've got these jihadists. So in this situation, it's going to be very difficult to organize proper and safe election. We have to organize proper and safe election like before here in South Africa. That's the solution, 1 man, 1 vote. But for that, we need proper and safe election. And now France doesn't want to organize this. They want to impose us this, I can say, this fake election. Sorry for this word. And,
now, you are in South Africa as the opposition leader for the Kite Movement. What are you doing here?
So I just came here first to say thank you to South Africa for all these things that you've done for our country. Like you know, 13 of your great soldiers died for us. to protect the population, and they saved many lives. So just for it, I just came first to say thank you very much to South Africa and to the population of South Africa. The second thing, we came to explain to our brothers and sisters what is the situation in CAR and to see what we can do together. So because this instability in CAR, this security problem in CAR, can be a problem for the rest of the continent. We've got these people of Boko Haram in CAR. We've got all the jihadists in CAR. And CAR is a very rich country with a lot of diamond all over the country, gold and everything. So with all these mineral resources, these jihadists can get these mineral resources. They're going to be very strong and they can destabilize Africa. It's these things that we came to explain to our brothers and sisters here and to see which solution we can find. I think, like you can see now, the UN, they can do nothing. And they try to do something, and I think that we have to find an African solution. Like, for example, and with the South African, for example, we never know if we can have the support of the South African troops again, because we know that you solve the situation of M23 in Congo DRC just in 1 week.
Yes.
The UN force, they tried during 3 years to solve the situation. They didn't do it, but the South African force, they solved the situation in 1 week. So just to say that I think that the best solution to secure the country is to find an African solution.
Mr. Koyabela, you have mentioned the resources of the country we see at stake, but there's another problem, and that is the fight between Christians and Muslims in your country.
To say you the truth, there's no problem between Christian and Muslim. They want to create this problem. France wants to create this problem, and they created this problem. But we are trying now, we are solving this situation, and all these crises they use to try to divide in giving weapons to different camps and to encourage people to fight. But now we've got the solution, and like I said, the real problem is not with our brothers and sisters, Muslim or Christian. There's no problem. Like before they tried to divide us based to ethnic groups and tribalism consideration. And now they try and they use this consideration, this religion consideration to try to divide us. The real problem is not, there's no problem of religion, there is a problem with France. That's our problem, with this neocolonialism system and concept of France.
Mr. Koyabela, I wish we had more time to explore this, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
Okay.
That was Pascal Vida Koyabela, the leader of the Kite Movement in the CAR, and we'll keep on watching that story. Now, back to our top story, where President Jacob Zuma is visiting Berlin in Germany, and we are joined live from Berlin by a correspondent there, Jack Parrock. Jack, a very good morning to you, and can you tell us what we can expect when the President meets the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, later today?
Well, the focus of these meetings really is trade. Now, Germany is the second largest international investor in South Africa after China, and it's a huge part of the South African economy. 2% of the South African GDP is made up by the German car company BMW. So these meetings are really important. It's a long-standing trade tie. They're going to be discussing those issues. But both leaders, both President Zuma and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, are facing domestic issues. The student tuition fee protests in South Africa have obviously dominated a lot of President Zuma's time, and the refugee crisis here in the European Union has been a real difficult period for the German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Tell us about the trade relations between the two countries, and what more can South Africa gain from this particular meeting?
So the trade relations have been long-standing, and as I mentioned, Germany is the second largest investor in South Africa, and it's an incredibly important relationship between the two. Now, I spoke to South Africa's Minister for Trade and Industry yesterday, Rob Davies, and he told me that what he wanted to do from these meetings was not only make the trade relations about opening it up for big companies, the big car companies, the bigger, kind of multinationals or the operations that Germany is already going for, but rather to make the trade relations easier for smaller-sized business, the SMEs, the smaller medium-sized businesses. Now, at the moment, there's been a slight imbalance where South Africa is importing more from Germany than it's exporting, so it's been going the other way. And his vision is to try and get some of those small and medium businesses better access into the German economy, so that they can boost that imbalance, so that the imports and exports will come to some kind of equilibrium.
And what can Germany gain out of more trade with South Africa?
Well, Germany is a fantastic country at signing trade relations with countries around the world. They will be looking for a deeper set of agreements as far as the auto industry goes. They are very fond of their trade manufacturing, their car manufacturing plants in South Africa, which are one of the only places on the African continent that can provide the labour skills to really make these high-end cars, which saves them a lot of time and energy in kind of exporting them out of Europe and out of Germany. So they'll be looking to deepen those ties and just to secure the friendship between the two countries that has been long-standing for a long time now.
Long-standing trade relations with Germany, but there are some concerns from Germans with regards to South Africa. What are some of those concerns that they've listed?
So there have been some criticisms from German officials about how the ANC in South Africa deals with corruption and whether the government has been tackling corruption at a high enough level. Now, clearly, the ministers I've spoken to in the delegation so far have said that all efforts are put into tackling corruption in South Africa, and that sometimes it's obviously not possible, but things must happen. But they also, the South African government has to deal with lots of different factors on the African continent themselves. South Africa is a political leader, clearly, in Africa. And so there's many issues at play here, and also with the trade relations mixed in, it can become a complicated picture. In general, the feeling is very positive, I would hasten to add.
Now, who else is with the President Zuma there, the prominent trade delegates accompanying him?
So there are trade delegates from across South Africa, and obviously they're meeting with their German counterparts. The kind of big names on this trip are the South African International Relations Minister, Maita Nkwana Mashabane, Rob Davies, the Minister for Trade and Industry, as I said, and there's some senior figures from Mercedes-Benz here in Germany and BMW as well. So there's some real hard hitters. This is certainly a high-end affair for these two countries. They're letting one another know that their trade relations are secure and that they want to continue them into the future for sure.
And what does the program look like for the delegates there?
So the first thing that's going to happen, we will all be meeting in an hour or so to meet with the delegations, which will then head to the Bundeskanzleramt in Berlin, which is where Angela Merkel has her offices. She will receive him. They will have a series of bilateral meetings between different members of the delegation, but clearly the kind of top billing is the meeting between President Zuma and the Chancellor Angela Merkel. And then President Zuma will head from there to the German presidency to meet the President, Joachim Gauck. He is not the kind of leader of Germany, obviously, with Angela Merkel holding the political power, but it's a courtesy call and it's also incredibly significant. And then there are a number of other different meetings across the board for the South African president, and we'll be speaking to him, in fact, later on this evening in an exclusive interview for the SABC.
Jack, thank you so much for that report. That was our correspondent, Jack Parrock, coming to us live via Skype from Berlin in Germany. Now, Lesotho's political unrest is beginning to show in economic activity, which has suffered a 10.2% decline in the second quarter. The Central Bank of Lesotho has released a quarterly review of monetary and financial activity for the period March to June 2015. The government that provides 30% of the country's economic activity delayed to release the annual budget for capital projects such as infrastructure. Now, this has affected government services. The central bank says that economic performance deteriorated by a further 10.2% in the second quarter of 2015. That's compared with a decline of 1.6% in the previous quarter. Government budget, usually allocated in February, was also passed only in May, resulting in the weak performance of government and construction subsectors. Mining and manufacturing subsectors showed robust growth, and there are also indications that the sector grew as a new firm started operations in the category of knit garments. The 3 police officers implicated in the killing of a robbery suspect, Kulakani Mpanza, have told the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court that they intend to challenge the authenticity of the CCTV footage that incriminates them. An attorney for Constables Titus Mobela and Jason Segola and Sergeant Puleng Sebetwa read each of their affidavits in support of their bail application. The 3 officers say they have children who are financially dependent on them and that they can only afford bail of 3,000 rand. The officers were arrested last week along with another constable who is out on bail. The footage shows the officers allegedly executing Mapanza. The bail application continues. And that's your news for now. We'll take a break and we'll be right back after that.
It is important for everyone to know food safety practices and make sure that their food is prepared safely from farm to the plate.
Who ensures that there's compliance?
In terms of all the abattoirs, they have to be registered. So when they are being registered, they are actually audited fully to make sure that the structural requirements as well as the hygiene requirements are met.
Most bacteria and viruses cannot withstand the normal cooking temperatures that we use to cook our food.
The bigger retailers cannot be seen as being insensitive to the food safety requirements.
There are many consumers that actually go shopping with a cooler box and ice packs so that they don't break the cold chain, because a few hours outside the temperature that it should be already shortens the shelf life of that product.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
You're still with Newsroom. Welcome back. Time for us to shift our focus to what is happening around the regions here in South Africa. We'll go to the Northern Cape now. The province is still battling with sanitation challenges. Since 1994, the Northern Cape has only managed to eradicate 26% of their bucket system backlog. Meanwhile, Minister of Water and Sanitation, Nomvula Mokonyane, has set a new deadline for the total eradication of the bucket toilets. That's across the country, and the deadline is March of next year.
Bloemfontein was established more than a decade ago. It is situated about 10 kilometers outside Kimberley. The settlement is home to more than 5,000 Klu and Kwesen community members. These residents have been using sex in their toilets ever since the settlement was established in 2003. They are now faced with sanitation challenges as the sex they have been using has not been collected by the municipality for the past 4 months. 29-year-old Sophia Guluva is a resident of Bloemfontein. She is unemployed and stays with a 10-year-old son. Guluva says she fears contracting diseases as she is forced to dig a hole and empty the sack in her backyard. She is pleading for decent sanitation services.
We are not happy about these toilets because we are forced to dig holes and empty them ourselves because they are not collected in time.
Community members say they feel neglected and are accusing the Northern Cape government and the Solblaki municipality of failing them. They are demanding flushing toilets like the ones used at the nearby Galeshewe township.
The owners of the toilets are forced to empty the toilets themselves. We don't want these toilets. We are struggling in Bloemfontein. These toilets are dirty and unhygienic.
the councillors.
The Solblaki municipality says they are looking into ways of finding alternative sanitation services for the community, as it is not possible to install flushing toilets in Bloemfontein due to some challenges.
The reality is that yes, we do have a number of challenges when it comes to the area, and we have actually interacted with the community members that side with the view of resolving this matter.
Bloemfontein is not the only settlement affected in the Northern Cape. There is also a settlement near Appington, where they are using a similar sanitation method. Meanwhile, Water and Sanitation Department says they are working tirelessly to meet the looming deadline.
We've had a problem of bucket toilets throughout the country. We must accept that they're part and parcel of our history, especially in our formal areas. The Northern Cape currently, as I have mentioned, has about close to 9,000 bucket toilets that we must eradicate currently. And for us to do that, some of the things that have been done as part and parcel of the implementation of the solutions, we have since discovered that there are quite difficult conditions that we have encountered in the implementation of the project. And those conditions have been geological conditions such as hard rock that has been encountered. But two, we've also had some unrest that have been caused by labor disputes in some of our projects. So those have been resolved, interventions have been brought into place, and with the interventions that have been made, it is anticipated that we'll meet the target and will eradicate the 9,000 plus bucket toilets that are remaining in the formal areas in the Northern Cape.
The department says more than 200 million rand has been set aside for sanitation services in the country. Puleng Mudupe, SABC News, Bloemfontein, near Kimberley.
Well, that's a look at what's happening in the regions around South Africa. Time for us to take a break. After the break, Kendall will be back, and he's talking to an expert about the ongoing doping scandal in athletics. We'll see you then.
And I'm Rebecca Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser Bush Imbev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makhamate, and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Our time is 27 minutes past 11, and our top story is the World Anti-Doping Agency has called to ban Russia from international athletics, and there's a chance that Russian athletes won't see the Olympic Village in Rio de Janeiro next year.
The World Anti-Doping Agency wants Russia's Athletic Federation banned from all international competition after a report into drug misuse found evidence of widespread doping. The agency described what it calls a deeply rooted culture of cheating in Russian athletics and systemic failures by global authorities to stop it.
We discovered information that not only related to sport corruption in the general sense of it, but also to possible criminal actions as well.
But the decision to suspend Russia can be made only by the International Association of Athletics Federations. Its president, Sebastian Coe, says Russia has until the end of the week to respond.
This is a 320-page report. We will have to absorb that. There will be lessons in this for all of us. And we will take those lessons. We will take those lessons. No, we will take those lessons. I want to hear what the Athletics Federation of Russia is actually saying in answer to those allegations.
But the Russian sport minister Vitaly Mutko denies the allegations, although he has been singled out as being both aware of and complicit in the doping scandal.
Now, all of this comes after the commission set up by WADA reported allegations of widespread corruption and collusion by Russian officials, including state security services. Now, systematic failures at athletics world governing body, the IAAF, were also identified. Only the IAAF has the power to ban Russia from international competition. The new president, Sebastian Coe, has given the country until Friday to respond formally to the allegations. The federation itself has been rocked by a French investigation into fraud involving its former chief, Lamine Diack. Russia won 8 Olympic gold medals at the London Games, among 17 medals in athletics. The commission said in its report that the 2012 Olympics had been sabotaged by the widespread inaction of international and national anti-doping authorities. Global police body Interpol said that it will be coordinating an investigation into suspected corruption and doping involving athletes as well as officials. However, the Russian Sports Ministry labeled the allegations as baseless. Meanwhile, the man who headed up the World Anti-Doping Commission, Dick Pound, said that the problem of doping is not limited to sports or athletics or to Russia.
It simply can't be only Russia and only athletics. I mean, we know there's a problem of doping. I mean, just from the positive tests you run, but I mean, in lots of other sports and in lots of other countries. So we just wanted to make it clear that, you know, our mandate was pretty narrow. Russia, athletics. But there's no reason to believe it's only athletics, and there's no reason to believe that it's only Russia.
Now, in light of what's transpired over the last 24 hours, we decided to check on the state of South African sports compliance. We'll speak to Khalid Galant, the Chief Executive Officer at South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport. Khalid, I hope you can hear us, and there you are. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Khalid, if you can speak a little bit louder, I'm sure we'll be able to hear you better. But with that said, there's been quite a lot said with regards to doping, compliance, and South Africa. How compliant is South Africa in light of what's being said about Russian athletics?
South Africa is fully compliant with the World Anti-Doping Code and also with the UNESCO Convention. But that being said, I mean, with the Russian Federation and the lab in Russia were also compliant. We are all compliant. We have to differentiate between being compliant on paper and also the process that we use to enforce and regulate our own compliance. And in South Africa, we're quite diligent in terms of separating those powers in the role that we have with the Ministry of Sport, who's independent from SAIDS. Though we are accountable to the government for our funding, the minister does not get involved in management or operational issues in the agency that could compromise our compliance and independence.
Okay, so now in terms of facilities, what do we have in terms of facilities that are licensed in this country?
There are 33 accredited doping control laboratories in the world. And South Africa has one of those laboratories, and we have the accredited laboratory in Bloemfontein that we analyze all our doping control samples. All doping control samples, no matter where they're collected in the world, have to be analyzed in one of those 33 laboratories.
Khalid, one of the things that has come up time and time and again is schoolboy sports as well as the use of steroids. It's been established that 1 in 5 schoolboys in South Africa use steroids. How do we overcome this particular problem?
The use of steroids among schoolboy sport, and specifically in rugby, which studies have shown, is a problem in South Africa. There's different strategies that we use to address it. Testing is obviously the deterrent and one of the most effective tools, because there's serious consequences and forensic evidence, but it's not the only solution. In our education program, we have now differentiated between education to the schoolboys, to the parents and coaches, and to the school governing bodies, because each of those target audience have a different stake in how they either address doping in schools or whether they're going to accept the use of doping in their schools.
Now, accessibility to steroids and other drugs is fairly easy across gyms, across the entire country. How does that get combated? It's so easy. You go to a gym, you find the right people to speak to, and you've got the drugs that you need. How do we combat that in South Africa?
Yes, that is a challenge. It's still illegal. It's a criminal offense. Steroids are scheduled drugs. We work very closely with one of the biggest gym chains in South Africa, Virgin Active, and Virgin Active has a zero tolerance policy for steroid use in their gyms and for being sold on their property. But there are other gyms also, and there are other stores, independent stores, that do sell steroids. And again, are partnering with law enforcement. We have discussions and meetings and trying to form a task force with the SABC and organized crime so that we can go at the root causes. Instead of just testing and punishing the schoolboys, but actually going after the suppliers and the traffickers of steroids.
Lastly, but not least, 30 seconds or less, how do we maintain that the SAIDS, the African Institute for Drug-Free Sports, maintains its integrity in light of what's happening? Because obviously a lot of stakeholders, how do you maintain the integrity of SAIDS?
Well, our processes are fairly transparent. It is up to the public and the media to hold our feet to the fire where they do think that we may transgress or to ask us questions on our processes. We do adhere to international standards, and where athletes test positive, those standards and our procedures come up for questioning in tribunals. And only 1 or 2 cases have been ruled against us where they felt the deviations from the standards were substantive enough that the athlete should have been given the benefit of the doubt and found not guilty.
Right. Now, thank you very much for that, Khalid. We know that you've got a report to get ready. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing this with us. We wish you the best in your fight against doping in sport.
Thank you.
Right, Khalid Galanta, CEO of the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sports, right there, talking to us from Cape Town. Now, on to other sports news. The German FA, the DFB president, Wolfgang Nießbach, has resigned over 2006 World Cup scandal, buckling under mounting pressure from an issue that's tarnished the reputation of the world's biggest national soccer federation. Now, Nießbach, under investigation for tax evasion, said he was taking the responsibility for a controversial $7.22 million payment to FIFA, allegedly using the bribe to bribe FIFA officials to vote for Germany's World Cup hosting bid. Meanwhile, the president of the Colombian Football Federation, Luis Bedoya, resigned unexpectedly. Bedoya was also one of the 11 members of the executive committee of CONMEBOL, the South American Football Federation. His resignation comes 2 weeks after the federation's accountant also resigned. CONMEBOL, an influential grouping that includes traditional soccer powers like Brazil and Argentina, is heavily embroiled in a corruption probe led by FIFA, by the FBI rather. Now, 14 soccer officials and sports marketing executives indicted in the States on bribery, money laundering and fraud charges. 8 were from South America. Now, that's where we leave it with that. Up next is another story which we bring home with. Now, the ANC in the Western Cape has called on SARU not to renew the contract of Springbok coach Hanneke Meyer. Western Cape leader Marius Fransman said SARU should find a coach who embraces transformation, while provincial spokesperson Yonela Diko said Meyer takes his cue from an untransformed board. SARU are due to make a call on the national coaching management roles mid-December, following the General Council and Executive Council meetings after the team ended 3rd at the recent World Cup in England. Now, staying with that big story of what's happening around the world of sports, earlier I asked a question of the day to renowned athletics reporter Manfred Sedler. This was his response. And so, the athletics world exposed the allegations of widespread corruption and doping in the sport. Singled out in the report released yesterday by WADA is the Russian Athletics Federation. The accusations range from intimidation by the Russian Secret Service of anti-doping lab technicians to the state sponsoring and protecting of athletes who were doping. With me as athletics journalist, renowned athletics journalist, I should say, Manfred Sedler. Good morning and welcome to Newsroom.
Good morning, thank you.
Manfred, one of the biggest things that's happened in sports is exactly what we're talking about now. In fact, these have been called the most serious allegations in the history of sport. Your thoughts?
I think it's an understatement. Seriously, I mean, if we just look at world sport right now, it's in trouble. FIFA, IOC, IAAF, you can keep on going. In terms of what's happening within the sport of athletics, when your former president, who just a couple of months ago, August, stepped down as president of the IAAF after, what, I think 18 years?
So it's around 16 years.
Yeah, Lamine Diak is in fact arrested and charged with fraud and corruption, taking €1 million. And that turns out to be pretty much hiding evidence of doping, which is basically match fixing. And that's right at the top. It's like Sepp Blatter being accused of manipulating
referees.
Correct. It's literally match fixing. And the Russians have gone and turned around and specifically fixed events at the 2012 Olympics in particular. So this is massive, and this is really make or break for the sport of athletics.
We're currently running a question for our viewers. Can sports still be drug-free? Can it, or has the horse bolted already?
It'll never be drug-free. As long as people compete, people will cheat. End of story. That's just accepted. The decision we have to make is, do we accept it and just ignore it and say, okay, just cheat, free for, or do we continue with our ethics and I suppose our morals and say it's not right? Do you look your kids in the eye and you say it's okay to cheat to get that gold medal? So we will never win the war on drugs. It'll always be there. It'll be perpetually there. If you go and look at the history of the Tour de France, and I'm going back from day one, as in like over 100 years, they used strychnine. They used all sorts of things to dope themselves. And they used to have little pins which they'd thrown in front of their rivals to puncture the tires and stuff. So cheating was always the case. From day one, the Tour de France. Guarantee you from day one, ancient Olympics, it's always been there. So no, simple answer is no. It'll never be clean.
Okay, let's look a little bit at the policing of doping in sport. The World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA. Should they have two things? One, would it make a difference if they had real independence? One, and two, if they had more powers?
They need more money, and because it's incredibly expensive to do dope testing. It's unbelievably expensive. You need specific labs for it. There's specific routines, etc., that you need to do, and so they need a lot more money. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, they're not independent, and they realize the crux. If they were entirely independent, and they need policing powers. So let's take it even a step further. Almost criminal powers. If you want to stamp out, well, we won't be able to stamp it out, but if you want to hopefully reduce drug taking, it needs to become a criminal offense. But now we're going into a complete different realm of law. Do you compare a drug cheat to a murderer? You can't. You simply cannot. And therefore, when people turn around and say we want a lifetime ban for athletes, how do you compare that to somebody who's committed murder?
Well, here's a question about what you just said. For example, illegal betting is a criminal offense. However, in football, match fixing is still rife. People still do illegal betting, so it doesn't quite work to make it a criminal offense, does it?
No. The only difference is that what would happen is that it looks like it's happening now with this case at the IAAF is that whilst WADA can impose bans, sanctions, 4 years and so on, you're not locked up. You can carry on training. You can go and do work and get other income. If you are criminally charged and you're locked up, all of that falls away. And herein lies the problem, that specifically the case of Lamine Diak and now the entire doping scandal has been handed over to the France criminal justice system as well as Interpol. So we've now actually gone out of the realms of WADA and their jurisdiction into criminal law, which is going to make it really interesting.
We're about to run out of time here, but I think it's very important that I ask you this. How likely is it that Russia will get banned?
It's a tough one. The current Russian Federation only came into power, if you will, in their spring, which was April, May. So they're turning around saying, but that's not us. We're innocent. That's the previous regime. Standard response, isn't it?
Even recently, there, like in June, July, they banned the entire race walk team because of doping allegations as well as doping violations.
Absolutely. So they will turn around and say, but hang on, we're doing something. It's the other guys. You can't ban us. And it's the dope centre. It's the Minister of Sport, etc. So they have to now go to an IAAF council, which has been called, and a special council meeting to decide whether or not Russia needs to be banned. Russia has to defend themselves, and based on that, the IAAF will make a decision.
All right. Now, one of the athletes that got heavily involved and affected by this is Caster Semenya. Now, in the 800 meters women's in the 2012 Olympics, apparently the Olympics were sabotaged, according to this report, because of the widespread doping. She got silver, and she was flanked by a Russian and a Russian. What happens now?
If you go back even a year before that, she was also beaten by that very same Russian at the World Championships. So on paper, Caster Semenya is a 2-time world champion and an Olympic gold medalist. She will be, if Savinova gets banned as is asked of her for a lifetime ban, she will become the gold medalist. Is it meaningful? No.
Right. Wow. Manfred, thank you.
Cool.
This is big. We need to talk more.
No problem. You got my number.
That was what's that, a man love moment you had there with Manfred?
It worked.
I'll tell you what, the question of the day we ask you, is doping or is drug-free sport? Can sport still be drug-free at all? To be honest, personally, I don't think so. I think we need to have a sport for those that want to take drugs and those that are clean, and have the two compete separately. That's my personal opinion. Elvis, do you have an opinion on this?
I tell you what, the day money entered the sport field, that is when doping also arrived. Because the other sportsman wants to be better than the other one, and they don't want to compete on an equal basis. And that is what's happened here.
The root of all evil, that is what Elvis says. What is your informed view, Mr. Sports Anchor?
My informed view, especially after having had a chat with Manfred earlier on this morning, was exactly what he said, that it's very difficult to actually maintain the integrity of a sport without drugs. So it's going to be a fight, but it should not be let go. We should keep on fighting and keep on fighting the good fight.
And maybe that the answer is yours, perhaps. Have two sports, one drug-free and one with drugs.
It works in bodybuilding, but let's have a look at what you guys have said to our question of the day. Now, they've been... Pigita comes with quite a sobering view. He says standards are more competitive and pharmaceutical enhancement change the morals of the game. It certainly does. But what if everybody has that kind of enhancement? That's the world we live in. It's the 21st century.
Odette Pulvey reckons, sadly, while sports big business, as Elvis just said, drugs will rule. The dream of reward overpowers any sense of reality. Gutter to glory.
Let's see if there's another one here from Kathy Bailing. Says, at Odette Povey, there have been accusations that authorities do turn a blind eye to keep sports interesting, and the money keeps on rolling.
That is cheating the audiences, isn't it? That's the match fixing in sport. There's another one from Kathy that says, incredible performance increase fan interest, which in turn increases the money for authorities and athletes. Yes, I agree with that sentiment, but then do what they do in bodybuilding. Have the ones that use enhancements for performance and don't dupe the audiences, and we see it for what it is, and have clean sports on the other side that continues the Olympic movement and the like, Elvis. But the way things are going, I don't think that we can continue with this facade that sport is being run properly, because all the sporting authorities are in crisis right now.
And I can tell you Russia is not going to be happy, because they might be out in 2016.
Well, that remains to be seen. On Friday, they actually have time until Friday to respond, and we'll see what happens. Sebco, he's on his toes as well, and his tinky toes, because he's in trouble as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, keep your views coming, because this story is not going to go away. There's another story happening today. Of course, we dealt with police brutality a little bit earlier. Outside the court, our reporter Jacques Stemkamp is there. Elvis, just paint us this picture here quickly. It looks like emotions have been running quite high outside the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court.
As you can see there from our reporter Jacques Steenkamp, he sends the scenes outside there. It looks like chaos on the one hand there, with the supporters there of the policemen. And as you can see, the police guard on the one hand. In fact, there was two queues apparently earlier on, and we don't see that picture here. But as you can see, it looks like it's going to be hectic there later on.
The police sentiment in this instance was very, very interesting. They were selling T-shirts there a little bit earlier. Now, some of the T-shirts had on them, "Who must die?" is the question that the police ask. Us or the criminals? What is the life of a policeman would? Now, a policeman is killed 2 every week here in South Africa. It's an interesting question, and it's a question that we're going to have to deal with here in South Africa.
It's a question that was posed many a times, and the public outcry there is, yes, the police are under the coach, and there is almost like a retaliation from policemen in terms of the job that they do and the pressure that they are under. And that is the type of thing
that's exactly why I've got a court of law, though. There's a judicial process, and that should be part of the conversation.
There you go. Sobering note there. Of course, that police brutality court case is ongoing in the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court. Back at the 12 o'clock, top of the hour, you'll get another update with what's happening there, and of course all the other developing stories. The president in Germany, he'll meet Angela Merkel a little bit later this afternoon, Africa and Germany's biggest trading partner. It should be interesting what comes out of that meeting a little bit later. On this very channel, you'll be able to watch it. We're going to say goodbye from Elvis, Kendall, myself. We'll link you to the continent's weather, and it's simple. It's hot everywhere. See you tomorrow.
Legamos.
Ciao.